Hello, Defy Gravity. How are you today? This is Juliana Sauber, and I am here again with Jerry Lynn Fabian. Super excited about today's conversation. This is the kickoff of our talk show that we talked about, and we're excited to bring you current topics and perspectives on those topics. So we have this grand reawakening, if you will, happening on the planet. And it looks like things that are incredibly scary. It looks like upgrades to our internet service. It looks like threats of forced inoculations. It looks like being placed under the control of organizations and people who don't necessarily have our best interests at heart. And we're clinging to this system. Some of us are clinging to a system that we know it, we're comfortable with it, we understand it as it is, but there is a new truth emerging. And in doing so, lies and deception is being revealed. And a lot of people are waking up, and they're waking up in a very chaotic and fearful place. That brings them more fear, allows them to be controlled by that fear, and then they're vulnerable to more. So it's this growing kind of thing. And we wanted to have a conversation about converting the perspectives on that, on integrating it, becoming aware of it, and things you can do to weather it, because what's happening, what's being created is really going to be amazing and beautiful. And it needs us to be aware of it. It needs us to integrate it. And then it needs us to rise above it, if you will, and live in a space of love and compassion. So welcome, Jerry Lynn.
Thank you.
Excited to chat with you about this one, as always.
Yes.
Yeah.
I enjoy discussing these topics.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about awareness. Let's start there. What are your thoughts on how aware do we need to be about the things that are being revealed?
That's a good question. I listened to a recording recently that stated that, when all of the stuff that's going on right now, when all of this started, there were actually people who were clueless as to what was going on because they didn't look at the news, they didn't read the papers, they were not on social media. The only indication was that they were going to get their groceries done and they saw a long line and people were grabbing toilet paper and they were asking what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought to myself, to an extent, these people were probably shielded. And then you have the other extreme of these people who read the news and they know the numbers every day and they can educate you on what this doctor said as opposed to what this politician said. It's one extreme to the other. And I thought, what does balance look like? What does balance look like? Is there a benefit to knowing what's going on in society? And I think there is, right? Your guidance system, what I call your internal navigational system, will let you know when you have had your fill.
Right. Yeah.
Right? When you start and you don't have to get to the point where you start experiencing fear to know that this is not serving you. Information that empowers you or that gets you to the point where you can stop and ask, okay, where do I fit in the process?
Yeah.
That's where awareness comes in. Okay. When you can be mindful of how everything affects the big picture and see yourself in the process, and see yourself not just in the process, but being able to seek solutions to what appears. I say appears because it's all about your reality, what appears to be a problem. Okay, so we're facing a big problem right now for many people. Where do I coming into the picture, and what is the solution? How do I shift things starting with me? Okay, that's where awareness comes in. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Right. What can I do to change things? I'm not going to be able to change the world, but what can I do with me so that my impact can be of such that it affects the rest of society?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I have been a fighter most of my life. Like I was willing to go toe to toe with the biggest guy when I was in manufacturing. I had no problem with that. And I swung away from that, and in my expansion and connection with my own higher self, my own inner guidance, and trying to navigate what was happening and be aware of it, I went away from it and said, okay, I'm just going to stay in this very loving space, sending love all the time. I'm not going to pay attention to any of that. And I then swung into, I need to know all of it. Like I was digging in hard and finding out, you know, and I would find videos and post them on Facebook. And what it brought to me was all these fights and arguments. And then I had to come to the center of that, I guess, which is, okay, so I don't need to be part of the fights, nor do I think they're beneficial to me be part of these arguments, the tug of wars that are happening, because they kept me in fear, they kept me in frustration and anger. And you and I have talked about the power scale of frequency and emotion. They kept me at those lower places. And it became hard to kind of extract myself out of that. It became harder and harder. And so my inner guidance, as you mentioned, the compass was like, wait a second, slow down a minute. It's okay that you know what's going on. But for me, it's not okay that I dig in and know all the details of what's happening, or the internet upgrade, or the Gates approach to how we're going to handle health, like that. I need to know every bit of what's going on. I do need to be aware of it. I do need to integrate it. The analogy that came to me was like, if there's this pile of stuff in the corner of your living room, and you have two choices. You can look at all of it and decide how you handle it and process through it and then do something about it. Like I can reject the control. I can integrate love. And do all of those processes, which can be difficult and challenging. Like it's going to bring up fear. It's going to bring up frustration. It's going to bring up all these emotions that we want to avoid. Or I can throw a blanket over it and ignore it. And every time I look at it, it's going to bring up this like, okay. Because in that fear process, we're giving away our power.
Yes.
We're allowing whoever and whatever is creating that situation to have control over us, right? It makes us want to stay in our houses and avoid everybody else and want to fight with people, and it creates dissension and disconnection. And eventually you're going to have to lift the blanket anyway. Right?
And you speak about all the effects that it has. The other thing too is it weakens our immune system.
It does.
It weakens our immune system. The body starts saying, hey, there's too much resistance going on here, and you're not paying attention because the emotions are our guide. Yeah. And since you're not paying attention, you start to experience it physically. Right. And so at the end of the day, the very thing that we're trying to avoid, you end up drawing to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we resist stuff. I have a picture in my mind of someone trying to pick a fight with you. And you can do one of two things. You can run away and that thing will still try and follow you. That person will still try and follow you. Yeah. You could say, listen, I'm not backing down. Let's go. Right? And one of two things. If you're stronger, that person might back down, or that might be your challenge to hit it head on. Right?
Right.
And there's another way. There is another way. You can move towards that situation without resistance. Call me an idealist, but it's worked for me many times. When people have it really, and I'm not just using it as a strategy. I literally say, this thing is not worth my time.
Yeah.
So somebody's trying to fight with me and I say, clearly, I'm not engaging this right now. I can revisit when we can sit and speak about this, but going back and forth in this way is not going to solve the problem.
Right.
And we can also approach life in the same way, where you don't run from the problem, you don't try and fight against it, but you actually move towards it with the intention of bringing alignment,
Yeah.
right? Bringing alignment. So in this situation, how do I move towards this? Okay, there is something going around that has a potential to compromise my system. That's what's being said. Where do I fit in the picture? Do I have any role in this picture? Is there something that I can do? What can I do to solve or to help the situation? Of course, there's something I can do. I have been given control of this body.
Yes.
So what can I do to empower it so that it can respond in such a way that whatever is coming at me is not going to affect me in the way that it's projected.
Right. Right.
That's what that looks like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's this discussion about sovereignty that we need to have, and that we are sovereign in ourselves, our soul,
Yes.
our spirit, our physical being. We have sovereignty over, but we have. I use the word willingly. We've willingly given up that sovereignty to the perceived experts, organizations, institutions, entities that we have been I'm going to use the word programmed,
Yes.
right? Because that's what television is, programming, right? So we've been programmed to believe that the celebrities are the ones to follow, or the companies that have created the technology or done the amazing things or built the best tennis shoes or whatever. Or the expert organizations like the medical industrial complex, our health departments and authorities, all of those people we've set up on this pedestal and said they are the ones we need to give over our control or our thought process to. And we've willingly done it in that we've selected that.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that we have this opportunity and to say, okay, now I did willingly give that over. I don't any longer follow or subscribe to that same belief system. Therefore, I take back my sovereignty. I say, I reject your attempts to control my life, and I send lots of love to you. I hope that you have an awareness of what works and what doesn't work at some point in time when it's right for you. But for me right now, I'm taking back complete control. And it sounds like this big, nebulous, really difficult thing to do. And I think it does take intention and practice.
Practice, yes.
But it is not impossible. It's far from impossible.
Definitely. You mentioned, I think the element that many people miss is most people are good at rejecting. Mm-hmm. I don't want this. You're good. We are good. I mean, no is one of the first things we learn to say, right? No, right. I don't want this. And then we stop there. And when we say, no, I don't want this, and you leave it there, the element that remains in our mind, the thought process that registers is, I don't want this. I don't want this. I'm going to push against it. I don't want this. But you didn't stop there. You mentioned, I'm going to send you love. Mm-hmm. And that aspect to me, it gives the other person just as much freedom as I am seeking myself. It's okay for you to do what you think is in your best interest. And it's okay for me to do what is in my best interest. By sending you love, I am actually blessing whatever it is you're focused on, while I am sending myself love and allowing what I desire to surround me. Yeah. Because love being the highest vibration actually protects us from whatever external forces may be trying to send our way that may be possibly harmful. Right. Right.
It's interesting you talk about the, protection piece of it. I'll use a real world example, and I've experienced this many times. We moved from in town to out in the country. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, watch out for deer, because we're in Michigan. A lot of deer in Michigan. There's deer everywhere, but there's a lot of deer in Michigan, right? So everyone's like, be careful about deer. And one of my regular practices is I will ask Archangel Michael to come and sit on top of my car when I'm traveling and like create this protection bubble. And I do it with my houses. I've done it with my workplaces, etc. And it is an empowerment tool, if you will, in that Archangel Michael is available to all of us, right? And is a protector, and brings, you know, the fire of protection. And so it's been really fascinating because, of course, I've had, you know, my family members like, okay, whatever. And I've had experiences on my own, and now they've seen it as well. Well, we're driving along on the road and we will see a doe, or we've seen it. We actually saw a very large buck do the same thing, come to the edge of the road. They would have probably hit the side of the car, but the deer will turn and run alongside us and then dive back off into the woods. And my husband said to me, I've never seen that before. Like, that's probably the 5th time I've seen that.
Wow.
It seems to happen a lot. Or they're
Yeah.
standing on the side of the road as I pass. They don't run across the road. If they do run in front of me, it's very far in front of me and it's not a big deal to stop. So it is, I believe very firmly that Archangel Michael has just helped create this sort of protective bubble, that the deer are also being protected from being hit by my car.
Right.
Until
Right.
then. And so we just run alongside each other, right?
And the intention that
Super cool when it happens.
yeah, that's really, really cool. You know, you were speaking and I was thinking, I've had very similar experiences, and I'm listening to you, and the thought that came to mind is that for our listeners, some of them may be thinking, Archangel Michael, like you said, you believe very firmly that Archangel Michael helped you. And I do believe that the intention that we put out is what comes back to us.
Yes.
Even before I knew any of this energy work, I remember driving on an interstate and getting off an exit that I had driven so many times before, but I was on autopilot. And the sign had changed, whereas before you would just drive and merge into the traffic, they had put a yield sign that I did not see.
Oh.
But every time I was driving, especially when I was driving on my own, driving across states, I would always ask for all my, at the time I would pray to God and say all your angels of protection around me.
Yeah.
Right? And I merged onto the road where it said yield, and all I felt was wind. And I saw that a truck was sharing the same lane with me, the same single lane with me, and it had taken up the entire lane.
Oh my.
Where I fit in the picture, I don't know until this day.
Wow.
But nothing happened to me, nothing happened to the car.
That's
and
amazing.
In that moment, I knew, I said, I asked for protection and it was there.
Yeah.
You know, again, the intention. Now, somebody may say, what about the other person who asked for protection? That's where alignment comes in. And it's not to say that I was more aligned than the next person, but this is what I would say. If you can't have two opposing emotions taking up room in your temple at the same time.
Yeah.
So if I'm asking for protection, but holding on to fear, what's dominant is the fear factor, and what I'm going to attract to me is things that liken that.
Yeah.
Or experiences that liken that.
Yeah.
Right?
So you reasons to be fearful.
Right. And in this situation is the same thing. Can I say I am protected and still be fearful of what could happen to me if I do that? And if I am not, where does the next question is, where does responsibility come in? How does that look? When is the table shifting towards me being responsible and me actually being fearful? And many people have not been able to determine where that ends. So many people go around talking about responsibility, but they're really fearful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I wear a mask at times, if I am to go into a building. If I'm exercising, I would not. But if I go into a building, I wear a mask. Does it bother me that the next person doesn't wear a mask? It doesn't. It doesn't, because I do walk as if I am protected.
Yeah.
Right? I do walk as if I am protected. So it's a fine line. But I think if people could remember, what is my dominant emotion right now? Because your emotion is your guide. What is my dominant emotion? And that right there will be the sign, or the the indicator of where I need to shift towards.
Yeah.
What thoughts am I harboring that's bringing around this emotion? How do I need to alter those thoughts or shift those thoughts towards better experiencing emotions?
Yeah.
Right.
One of the ways that I encourage people to do, because we don't process through emotion, we get to a point and we go, no, 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 I can't deal with this. And then we move on to something else, right? We avoid it. We get angry. We go, I don't know, go for a drive, go have a drink, whatever. And I encourage my clients in session, and even beyond that, just in general conversation, to experience the fear in a place where you know that you're still like, I am gaining and regaining control over my emotional body, my energetic body. And in doing so, I accept the fear as a reality and I allow it to come in, and then I take back control. And it's a word play. It's just I accept that I have fear. And I release the fear from my energetic body. And you might repeat that 50 times.
Yeah.
And feel it and experience it and pull it in and let it happen and bring the tears up and bring the I can't, I'm having trouble breathing, or it's sticking in my throat, and you push through that and it crests up, and then it hits a point, and then it subsides and the fear is gone.
That's interesting, because that's one of the tools also used in TFT. You acknowledge that this is the emotion that you've been holding on to.
Yeah.
I think it also helps to acknowledge that it's in the past. And that, to me, is one of the most phenomenal things about experiencing change, is to recognize that my brain doesn't even have a concept of time.
Yeah.
That everything that is happening now is already past tense by the time I have finished saying it.
Right.
And if I can acknowledge that, then nothing needs to be lingering that is not pleasant. And I could just allow myself to experience this thing in the moment, knowing that it will pass.
Yeah.
This too will pass, right? And so even to people who might be experiencing fear in the moment, the idea is not to fight against the fear. The idea is to acknowledge that I have been looking at this situation completely differently from the way my spirit knows reality really exists.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that, and I'm ready to do something different. I just by voicing the acknowledgement, it brings a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Because although we experience negative emotions in the process, we find ourselves being resistant to it, and that creates even more issues in the process.
It does. It does.
So acknowledging this is where I'm at, and where I'm at is okay.
Right.
Wherever I'm at in this moment is okay.
It's where I'm supposed to be, and it's okay. Yeah, I'd like to add into that what you just said, which is brilliant. 95% of our emotion stands under the surface, if you will, subconscious, right? And most of it we don't have memory of. We don't necessarily have an event associated with. Sometimes, some people do, and some things are very much at the surface, but most of it is not at the surface. And it is, as you mentioned, your subconscious mind has no time. So something that happened to you when you're 3 years old, your subconscious mind does not know you're 35 chronologically. It's still working to integrate the emotion of the event that happened when you were 3 years old that you were not able to work through. Either because at 3, you should have someone helps you work through those events, a parent. A loving parent who takes you in and says, you're safe, it's okay, tell me what's going on, allows the tears, allows you to speak out your fears, and helps you to come back to a place of safety. But if you're 3 years old and don't have that person in your life, you may carry that emotion all the way through, and here you are 40 years old, and that fear keeps rising and rising and rising, and you need to come back and integrate that whole piece of it, which is part of what you and I do, right? To help people integrate that piece of it, even if it's subconscious. You can do the conscious work and tap into your subconscious mind and experience the energy and then release it. And the cool part is, I always see it as like, you've got this, let's say you got this bucket of fear, right? And we just emptied that bucket of fear. Now we're going to fill it up with love or joy or
Exactly.
happiness or all these great things.
It's like you have a wound and, you know, you get into there and you get it all cleaned up, but you have to put something over it so that it can heal.
Yeah.
You know, and you mentioned something significantly about, say, a child who did not have that. To recognize that, or to acknowledge even that sometimes even your parents are working through their own programming from their childhood that could have been passed on to you.
Sure.
Because I hold to the theory, I think Candace Pritt's neuropeptide theory would support this, that
Yes.
what is actually passed on is the emotions and not necessarily the physical illness.
Yes.
So
agreed.
we inherit the emotions of our parents, all right, which sometimes manifest physically. And so many times they are not in a position, most parents who have not worked through their issues are not in a position to help you to process your stuff.
Right.
Right? And that's where spirituality and awareness comes in, because life teaches you, and eventually anybody who's paying attention, you will get through whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
Right? You will pass through to the other side.
Right.
But many times we're functioning on autopilot, and all it takes is one trigger and you're back to 3 years old.
Yeah.
One trigger, and we have 35-year-olds walking around in business suits, but they're functioning as 3-year-olds, and we want to know why are there so many issues going on in the office. No, you know, that advertisement just came to me, that advertisement with the little Jolly Rancher where you have everybody sitting around the table.
Yes.
And I like this is really what you have in work environments, because people are functioning from that 3-year-old mind and not even recognizing it. You know, you
Yeah.
pass 18 and now you have authority. You have the authority to act like a 3-year-old if you want to,
Right.
because you're an adult.
Right. Yeah, I mean, talking along the lines of inherited emotion from ancestors, you know, we have 4, 5, 6 generations of people who, you know, I don't have time to deal with emotions. Boys don't cry. You know, that's
Exactly.
not just, suck it up. You know, we've got to get to work. There's things we got to do to survive. And we have a medical industry that is very Newtonian. It's very physical, right? So if it's not physical, if I can't test it or analyze it or cut it out of your body, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some work, doing some research into DNA, and there are 3, they've identified our core genome, if you will, of our genetics. And there are 32,000, I think, of them that they've identified. And there are 2, what they call junk DNA strands. And they call it junk because they don't know what it's for. It's like when they used to cut out the appendix because they didn't know what the appendix did.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know what the appendix does, and we really should be maintaining them. Same with gallbladders, etc.
Right.
And it's none of this is new information. Like, you know, as Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, many of the older methodologies, shamanism, all talk about the emotion and the energy and the integration of that.
Right.
And so we have lots of generations that have been told if it's not physical, it doesn't exist. And so when we talk about emotion and energy and all these kinds of things, they reject it outright, just outright rejection. So what I was given was that these 2 junk DNA strands are your inherited DNA energetics from your mother and your inherited DNA energetics from your father that integrate to your genetic strand.
Interesting.
And I'm not finding science to support this. This has been my sort of intuitive hit. And in doing so, it's been interesting to kind of go into those strands and find where energetically, you know, your mother experienced worthlessness, which manifested as a need to put on a facade and be the perfect mother and the perfect housewife, and that transitioned over to you. And and our generation went out into the corporate world to prove
Mm.
that we could be as tough as anybody else and rise the ladder and break the glass ceiling and all these kinds of things. Again, an outward expression, the keep up with the Joneses, again, an outward
Yes.
expression of my own lack of feeling like I'm worthy. And in the process of taking back your power, a big piece of that is you got to sort of wipe the chalkboard
Mm-hmm.
that was given to you and throw on there, I am worthy, I am love, I am peace. And all of
Exactly.
those are commanding statements that create. And
Exactly.
you're taking back control. So we get back to that sovereignty discussion. I am in control and sovereign over my energetic body, my physical body, mind, and spirit.
I like that you call it the junk DNA.
Yeah.
It's called the junk DNA.
Yeah.
And whatever is junk, you can get rid of, right? You're
Mhm.
empowered to get rid of. I like that. Something similar to you, remember I said that I've come to the conclusion that what we inherit is the emotion. And
Mhm.
so what I have been looking at is some of the emotions that have been stored, that are stored in particular regions of the body.
Mhm.
And the possibility that what is actually passed on when we say that certain diagnoses are passed on from generation to generation, instead of looking at the physical symptoms, look at the emotional components
Mhm.
and see whether those emotions have existed for generations.
Yeah.
I've done so with certain things in uh, certain situations that exist in my family, my immediate family, and I've been able to see that link. I've done so with other individuals, and I've been able to see that link. And that to me is even more empowering,
Mhm.
because the minute I make it a physical symptom, then somebody else has the authority. We've been speaking about who has the authority over us, right?
Right.
Somebody on the external has the authority now to come and fix this thing for me,
Yes.
right? But we don't necessarily depend on anybody to fix our emotions. Once you
Right.
become aware of it, that awareness empowers you to do something different, to change the trajectory of what is likely to happen.
Yeah.
All right. And
Yeah.
so I found that, paying attention to the emotional patterns that exist among generations is more empowering than just looking at the physical symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating to kind of walk down the path of this new. I call it a new awareness. I feel like it's a renewed awareness, because again, these are
Mm-hmm.
not new concepts by any means. The idea that there's an emotional connection between, like worry about money and kidney challenges,
Yes.
or disappointment and spleen, or disgust and resentment and gallbladder.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all been well documented, and this reemergence and reawakening to me is going to change the trajectory of, we talk about, again, going back to the original topic, is, we all these things that are attempting to take control and maintain control and create problems for us can only do so in the context of, I don't have any control over this, so I'm
You
going to
know,
be in fear, and I'm going to, rail against it, or I'm going to argue about it, or I'm going to hide from it. Uh, Neither of which is going to end up leaving you in the place that you really want to be.
exactly. You speak about the documentation of all of this, but I like to point people towards their own experiences,
Mm-hmm.
because we speak these things all the time.
Yeah.
Somebody there, I'm sure somebody's listening right now could think of either someone or your own experience where you had an experience where you got suddenly afraid and you needed to run to the bathroom.
Yeah.
The physical symptoms just came right about
Mm-hmm.
as a result of the emotions that you were experiencing.
Yeah.
Um, and we make certain expressions, and ever so often I try to think of some of them. People actually said, you're giving me an ulcer.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, we make I had a gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We say those things all the time, and I think we intuitively say them and not recognize that there is a mind-body connection that's happening, a mind-body relationship. Our
Yeah.
thoughts or emotions, physical symptoms exist. Um, And so one of the greatest intention I would put out for humanity is that we become more aware, more mindful of our experiences. This is one of the reasons why I am grateful for this time, because I believe that to an extent, this is the purpose for this,
Yeah.
that it's causing everyone to slow down so
Mm-hmm.
that we can be more mindful. We're not just functioning on autopilot and making everything a random coincidence because we're so busy that we don't want to stop to
Right.
make the correlation between our experiences and what is happening in our reality,
Yeah.
you know? So I believe that's what's happening with humanity right now. And as people become more aware, they realize that really my body has been speaking to me all along,
Mm-hmm.
and now I can be aware of what's going on
Right.
inside.
Right.
Mhm.
In that awareness, some may get stuck in the fear and in the chaos, and
Mhm.
recognize, I guess one of my encouragements is to recognize that that's an okay place to be.
Yes.
And there are individuals who uh, are available. There are learnings available to you to guide you towards an integration of that, because we don't want to not integrate it.
Oh, definitely.
When we avoid talking about it, we leave it in its own power. If we talk about it, integrate it, take back control of it, we've taken that power back.
Yes.
And
And
when
you
you,
bring alignment.
yeah, yep,
Mhm.
and then we come into alignment with it. And in doing so, we can then have influence, if you will, towards taking all of these things, and they no longer have effect on us. And we might even be able to have some control or to utilize some of those things.
Exactly.
So I think of this internet upgrade we're going through.
Mhm.
Number 5 comes to mind, right?
Mhm.
So this internet upgrade we're going through, with the intention that you can place on it, the awareness you can place on it is, oh my God, they're going to take us over. Oh, they're going to control our brains. They're going to scramble our electrical system. They're going to create all kinds of illness. You can stay there, right? Or you can say, okay, well, that's a possibility. However, what I'd rather do is I would rather understand that as a potential, and then I'd rather integrate the knowledge that I have some influence on how that impacts me, right? And I would much rather utilize that same system to project
Yes,
love and compassion and support and guidance out into the world that way. And
I
it's really
agree.
interesting. I'll call it the if you want to put your fingers on the reality of this happening, is you look at some of the censorship entities, the large media outlets that are censoring and influencing what you're being told or what you're hearing. There are alternate outlets that are popping up and gaining momentum.
Mhm.
And these outlets are an opportunity for you to get in, for you to see what's going on, to understand it, and then to be a positive force for
I
change.
agree.
Um, and that's where it gets really fun and exciting, is to say I can be a positive force for change.
Exactly, exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of being part of the group that fights against,
Mm-hmm.
anything you fight against, you're actually becoming one with.
Yes.
Right? You're actually becoming one with, and if you're not prepared, it's going to overtake you.
Yes.
Right? So, in my mind, what that looks like is if I have this thing right here that's functioning on a level 5,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm functioning down here and I'm trying to fight against this that
Mm-hmm.
has a vibration that is easily going to take over me, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
What makes sense to me is try to figure out what can I do to match up to what's going on here, so that if we're on the same level, then
Mm-hmm.
you become an accessory for me to continue spreading love and light,
Yeah.
for me to continue to exist even on a higher level,
Yeah.
where this I might be able to provide some of the same things that you have the ability to provide, because we're functioning on the same vibration.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, Einstein even said you cannot solve the problem at the level of the problem.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we have to
The
solve the
problem and
problem.
the solution are in two different vibrations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you're staying in the fight, and I was in the midst of it, right? I'd post something on Facebook and then they would, you know, somebody would argue me and then another argument, then another, and I get caught up in it and I'd be, oh, you know, railing about it and tell my family, et cetera. And I had to intentionally pull out of those conversations. So I will still throw things out there because I want to keep educating. I want to keep throwing knowledge and information and for people to analyze. I'm not saying take my view of it. I'm saying take the broad picture of it and create a view that fits your reality, your perspective, where you can work the best. And so I will put things out there with the intention of not responding to any comments, or I may only respond to comments that are asking questions for more information or providing additional supportive information. But by me engaging with people that are fighting against it, I'm by definition perpetuating it.
Right.
And I'm not intending to perpetuate any of this stuff.
You know, I've shared this with quite a few people. Since my emotions are my navigational system, there have been times that sometimes you function out of impulse, not recognizing what guidance you're under during that time.
Yeah.
There have been times I've posted stuff and turn right back around and take them down.
Yeah.
Because I did not feel good in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know, that's okay. I think our intention, where focus goes, energy flows. So our intention for what we're doing follows us.
Yes, it does.
And so if the intention that you're putting out with what you're doing is to spread love and light and to educate the masses, I believe that's what people receive in the process. If somebody doesn't receive that, it's because they're somewhere else. you know. But the intention is very significant as far as I'm concerned.
It is, absolutely. So along the lines of, you know, the fact that people are starting to become more aware of what's going on and may be caught up in the fear or the anger or the frustration, what might you recommend someone do who is aware enough of it that they don't want it, but isn't aware enough to know, what do I do about it? What do I do instead? So what might you give them by way of suggestions?
Okay, that's a good question. I would start with what you have direct power over. And we've been given power. We came into this world with power over our thoughts, our ability to think. Okay?
Yes.
And acknowledging where you are at the moment is the first place to start. I'm functioning under fear. Now, some people who have not been mindful of their emotions and even know what those emotions feel like and how they project those emotions might not be able to do this right off the bat. Okay, somebody might be fearful and thinking, no, I'm just a concerned citizen who loves everybody. You know what I'm saying? But you go back to the physical symptoms. All right, I'm experiencing panic attacks. I can't sleep at night. That is not loving your society and bringing out the best for everyone. Because when you're doing good, it promotes well-being. Okay, anything that's promoting anxiety and fear is not serving your body. Okay, so you look at the physical symptoms. I've not been able to sleep at night. I'm having panic attacks. I can't breathe. Every time I look at the news, I feel this knot in my stomach, in my throat, in my gut. That's a sign that you're out of alignment. And if you can acknowledge in that moment, this thing doesn't feel good, and acknowledge that the reason it doesn't feel good is because I'm probably holding on to thoughts associated with fear and anxiety and worry. And the third thing is to not judge yourself for it. That's the big factor right
Yeah,
there.
give yourself grace.
Yes. Because many people would acknowledge, hey, this is where I'm at. Oh, I should know better than this. And, you know, you don't want to go there because you're only going to perpetuate the issue. To acknowledge that where I am in this moment is okay. You can't have greater expectations of yourself than where you've been functioning.
Yeah.
Especially if we go back to those triggers that existed from your childhood, right? It's all connected. And so once you acknowledge that this is what you've been harboring, and to acknowledge that it's not been serving you, put out the intention for you to start focusing differently.
Yeah.
Because that focus is going to get your thoughts in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that you have control over is to start considering other habits that you've been practicing which have not been serving you, all right, which have been keeping you on this lower level.
Right.
Some of the direct things and many times when I speak to people, I'm also speaking to myself.
Yeah.
I've been saying for some time now that water could be your answer to the big dreams that you're trying to achieve. Because by drinking more water, you're actually giving your body the opportunity for your blood to flow more freely, your thoughts to be more fluid, right? And you're putting yourself in a state where you're able to think clearer, right? And so that's another thing, drinking more water, looking at the foods that you're eating and what vibrations exist in those foods. Are they life-giving foods, or are they just empty energy that I'm putting in my system that's not going to help me in any way, right?
Yeah, I did notice that pizza was always sold out at the grocery store, but vegetables were not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I never worry about getting the things that I need when I go to the grocery store because
Right.
you know, it's not the popular item.
It isn't. I'd like to add something to the drinking water, and that is adding some Himalayan pink sea salt to it, because it balances your energy. So talking to flow, right? It's bringing things in, it allows things out. So not just physically, like sodium into the cells, potassium out of the cells, but you talked about the flow of thoughts. So the idea that you think of a thought, fear thought, and rather than it circling in your head over and over, you go, okay, all right, I'm afraid of that thing. Now, what can I do instead of being afraid of that thing?
Yes.
Which you may not know the answer to that question in the moment, but as soon as you put that question out there, what can I do to not be afraid of that thing? A solution will be presented to you. It might be a book or an article or a person or a video that pops up that you hadn't seen before, or you'll get to see our video, or, you know, whatever it is. But the thing that you need that process the action, the person will appear to you.
Right.
Just to your point of awareness, be aware of those things.
Yes.
So that you can accept them in and get the lesson. To me, grace is also saying everything that's being presented to me is for my best and highest good.
Yes.
And in doing so, you might even see the difficult things as opportunities when you kind of analyze the whole thing. So when I lost a job that I had a number of years ago, I was devastated. And then I went and it gave me an opportunity to be at home with my family. I identified an issue with my son that I had not known about. So it gave me time to help find a solution for that issue and work through some emotions of my own before I stepped into the next phase. So again, it was a difficult thing, but it created a huge opportunity for us to move forward in a couple of places that were really stuck. So
right. You mentioned something that I wanted to touch on. It's going to come back to me. Earlier we were speaking before we started recording, we were talking about magnesium. And I mentioned to you that ever so often, I think you use it for pain. And I've used it at times just to have a good night's rest.
Yeah.
And so, again, since some people may have been functioning on overdrive and have given their body momentum in one direction, you may need some fuel that's
Yeah.
going to assist you in going in the other direction. And some supplements might help as well. So for me, again, it depends on so many factors, and that's why where Julie mentioned that you may need some assistance in the process, seeking professional guidance to know what your body needs, what would assist you, what would be good fuel for you.
Yes.
For me, magnesium helps, calms me down, gives me a
Right.
good night rest,
Yeah.
helps relax my muscles.
Right. I always see magnesium as, so magnesium and calcium, of course, work in opposition. They're antagonistic to each other. We push calcium, which is about hardness and solidity and not moving, which is, again, we need to talk about balance, right? So we need a level of hardness and solidity in order to achieve things in life, in order to, I'm going to do this for myself, I'm going to move
Mm-hmm.
forward. But you also need enough flexibility to actually move forward. So I
Right.
see magnesium as flexibility. So
Mm-hmm.
again, if you're stuck in a thought process, if you're stuck in a fear process, some magnesium might help you get in just enough movement to where you can flow right out of that.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right,
that's a really good point.
right. Now, here's another
Grounding.
thing.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say grounding yourself.
Yes.
Spend a lot of time indoors. And indoors is where we have all these electronics that are interfering with the human body because we are electrical beings, right? So getting out and hug a tree. It sounds
Yes.
silly, but there's a lot of energy transfer between yourself and the earth. And you can look it up scientifically. It's called the Schumann resonance. And Einstein identified the resonance frequency of the brain, and Schumann identified the resonance frequency of the earth. And someone later put the two together and they're like, hey, look, they're within within 0.2 of each other. Like there is something to be said for the resonance frequency of the earth and humans. And anybody that's ever gone camping will tell you that they sleep much better when they're camping
Mm-hmm.
because they have an opportunity to get outdoors and to be away from all those electronics and just shed all of that down into the earth, and the earth will take care of it for you. So the more
There's
you,
probably a reason why kids like playing outside without their shoes on.
yeah, oh yeah,
Intuitively, they know that they need that energy.
they do.
You
Yeah, and
know?
we throw a lot of rubber shoes on and we spend a lot of time indoors under fluorescent lights.
Mm-hmm.
And then we
Mm-hmm.
go, I don't know why I'm sick.
Interesting.
There's a contributing factor. So yeah, getting outside and and if you're in that stress moment, that fear moment, and you're like, I just don't know what to do, get outside and sit next to a tree.
Mm-hmm. Or
Get
take your
outside and
shoes
do some
off and walk in the
gardening.
grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never knew why until I learned about Schumann resonance and grounding. I never knew why gardening was amazing for me. Like
Oh
I would
yeah.
spend an hour pulling weeds and planting, and then I would just sit and I felt so settled and happy and content, and I could think clearly and I could solve problems. You know how many problems I solved pulling weeds? It's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, it is grounding. I've had that experience as well when I was going through a significant phase in my life, and um, I happened to spend some time on a farm for a little bit, and
Right.
being out there was my therapy. I
Yeah.
enjoyed every bit of it.
Yeah.
Being in the sunlight, sometimes I'd take my shoes off while I'm weeding,
Right.
and you would think that I'd be tired once I'm done, but I actually felt like I had more energy to keep
Mhm.
going. Um, the other point that I was going to make earlier, connected to what you said of grounding, meditation,
Yeah.
when you're able to find time to, you don't have to be outside, but it's even more amazing when you can do so outside in the
Mhm.
outdoors. Um, Meditation, and we spoke last week about releasing beliefs that no longer serves us. I
Yeah.
do acknowledge that there are many people who have resistance to the word meditation because it sounds like some woo-woo stuff.
Right.
And I could replace that with deep breathing.
Yeah.
You know, we do
Yeah.
not practice healthy breathing,
Yeah.
and our body is made up majority of energy that we receive when we can stop and take some deep breaths,
Yeah.
right? Intentional deep breaths.
Yes.
Um, and so to start off, somebody who has never done it before, I remember the first time I intentionally meditated, I only did it for 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes made a whole world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could go for 30 minutes to an hour, but back then those 5 minutes was like life to my soul because I had not done it before.
Yeah.
So 5 minutes, setting your timer on for 5 minutes and just intentionally breathing, and your thoughts are going to be racing because it's not something you've practiced, but you don't try to fight against those thoughts. You just acknowledge in the moment that I'm having these thoughts, right? I'm having these thoughts. You're aware of what's coming to your mind. And when your timer goes off, you continue your day.
Right.
Those few minutes will help your thoughts to move towards another direction.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started, I would take a few breaks throughout the day and just do those 5 minute meditations.
Yeah.
5 minute meditation throughout the day would make a huge difference.
Right.
Huge difference.
I'll tell you a counterintuitive practice that was amazing for me. Having been high-strung corporate VP, get it done, can't stop moving type.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of sitting still for any length of time and not accomplishing something was impossible for me for a period of time. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I was ever going to do. Why am I wasting my time? There are things I could be doing instead. I have a to-do list that is this long. A couple of things that really helped me was I would get 2 pieces of paper or 2 notebooks with the intention of meditating, right? So I would use the 1 piece of paper for a to-do list and the 1 piece of paper for a I'm frustrated with life list, right? And I would begin to write, and whatever came out is what I wrote down. So I'm really mad at my husband. I can't believe he did this. I'm really mad at my kids. I'm really mad at my boss, and blah, 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 blah. And then a to-do item would pop into my head and I would write it down on my to-do list. And I would just literally just write it down. Like, it's not going to be, I'm going to get up and go do it. I just want to put a pin in it, as we used to say in corporate America, put a pin in it.
Stick a pin in it.
So then I would take that, I would exhaust that frustration list. And then I would shred it, burn it, whatever. Like, okay, I release all of these things out for healing. And I would set that aside and I would breathe 4, 5, 6 times. I might go for a short walk. And then I would feel like I had dumped all of that out. And I use an angel buckets meditation. That's great too. Literally, it's like there's angels that have a bucket and you just spew all that garbage into the angel bucket and then they take it. They take it and they do whatever healing, dissolving, whatever needs to happen with it. And then I no longer have that anymore. And that was part of my intention. It became part of my intention over time. I no longer have any of this anymore. It's gone. It's been dissolved, healed, whatever. I'm going to allow it to flow. And then I felt much better. And over time, then I could meditate and kind of quiet my mind and get into theta and do all those things. But it took me a couple of years to get to that point. So I bring that up because I don't want people to think that if they can't get time of quiet mind or whatever, that there is something wrong with doing active meditation. Because the act of getting that stuff out is powerful.
Yes.
You talked about the junk DNA, the purging, when you're clearing out a room, you got to deal with the things in the room. So that really, those were powerful processes for me.
Yeah, that's very significant because for me, what you practice, I have not done in so much details, but I realized for me, one of the things that helps to keep me grounded is writing.
Yeah.
Just getting those thoughts out of my mind, putting them over there and letting source handle that. It's not anymore. I also have a friend who paints. And many times when he starts painting, he has no idea what he's doing.
Oh, wow.
But he'll show it to someone and they come up with an entire explanation of what they see from his painting, which would actually be an answer to stuff that he was trying to figure out in the process.
Very
But
powerful.
while he's doing it, he's not aware, right? Yeah. And I told him that's your form of meditation.
Yeah.
That's the way in which you meditate. because while he's doing it, he's just focused on the beauty of the painting,
Right.
not even recognizing that his source is painting through him.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, that is completely his higher self, his subconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, is like,
beautiful.
here is the thing.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
The answer to the question you've been seeking is always,
Within you.
always,
Always within you.
always. And that's why, again, going back to the type A personality, I was such I'm still am a problem solver, but I'm much more, I'm going to use gracious about it. So sometimes if I think of a problem, I will think of a solution pretty quickly. Other times I think of a problem and I go, I don't have the solution yet. It's not quite ready. And I allow it to blossom and become what it is. 10 years ago, I would have been super frustrated that I didn't have the answer right now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's, it is an allowance over time. But yeah, the solution is always presented in whatever, in God's timing,
Yes.
when it's prepared. If another person's involved, maybe they're not quite there, so their preparation process needs to, and then it will be merged together and you'll get what you are needing or seeking. So,
Right.
yep.
You mentioned that, once people put the intention out there, that answers would start coming in various forms. And I cannot undervalue the significance of energy work.
Yeah.
But initially, someone getting into this would have no idea what they're doing. And that's where professionals come in.
Yeah, sure.
Seeking out energy healers, people who are mindful of how everything around us is affecting us on a subconscious level, on a physical level, various dimensions, and working through some of those traumas that have been triggering you to respond on autopilot, right?
Yeah.
When situations like this arise. And also in addition to that, I would say you will find in the process that you're being led to your niche. There's so many aspects of energy healing, and there's so many thought process, all of them with the same intention.
Yeah.
All of them with the same intention. But for me, it was Reiki. For you, what was it?
Well, I went the roundabout way, E-code and sound healing and essential oils and Reiki, and sort of put together this toolbox.
Right. And I have a toolbox as well. But at first, when I was looking to just get out of that mind frame that I was at the time, that's what I was led to, and that has led me to other modalities in the process. So I just wanted to put that out there, that in addition to everything else that we're suggesting, that there might be a necessity, because I know what I experienced some years ago when I was trying to deal with my stuff, right? And it was with the absence of major external factors as what's going on right now.
Right.
So I could only imagine how much worse it must feel trying to figure out your internal conflict combined with the global issues that are happening. It must be on a higher level. Right. My heart goes out. My heart goes out so much for anybody who's dealing with multiple faceted issues at this time.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think that's part of the reason why these conversations became so important, is because I think you and I both recognize, because I did the same thing. I did my work when the world was running on an even keel. And so doing it in the midst of this, I can't even fathom it at this point in time.
And that's the beauty too of everybody walking their own path, because life has, why am I getting teary? Oh my gosh. When I was going through some stuff years ago, I felt at the time that there was nobody who understood what was going on. In the moment, that's what it felt like. And I remember saying that I do not want anybody else to have to deal with their situations and feel as isolated as I did.
Yeah.
And that has been one of my biggest intentions.
Right.
And I realize now that I had to be one of those people who experienced it in isolation, so
Yeah.
that I'll be able to prepare myself to help the next wave of individuals who
Yeah.
would be dealing with their stuff. And although there is help available now, still feel like they're isolated because it's on a bigger magnitude,
Yeah.
you know?
I will add this too. You know, if you're one of those that's waking up by themselves, which was me, and I think you as well, and it is in perceived opposition to all the people that are in your current sphere, it does create this, I'm all by myself, and every time I bring it up to my family, they think I'm nuts, they think I'm crazy, they shut me down, they argue with me, etc., which drives you even more isolated. And so then it becomes a choice. It becomes I'm going to pursue this because I know in my heart that this is the right path.
Right.
And you have to run that alone, which, by the way, you don't have to run that alone, but you feel like you're going to run that alone.
Yes.
Because to Jerry's point, there are lots of us out here.
Yes.
You know, we're not the only two. There are many. But, you know, we might be the first two you're hearing from potentially. Or you sequester yourself and you cocoon and you don't come out the butterfly you're meant to be. And that's the thing I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see people cocoon and miss the butterfly opportunity.
Right. And what I discovered was exactly what you just said. The minute I started just owning, this is where I am, and I know this is right for me at this moment, life started sending me people from so many avenues. Life started sending me people. Now I feel like I have a great community of people who understand, love, accept, you know, challenge when necessary as well.
Yes. And challenge authentically. I think that is a key part of this community, is that the challenge is for the purpose of all of us growing. It's not a challenge from jealousy. It's not a challenge from ego that is attempting to keep you down. It's a challenge to say, I see a little more for you.
Yes.
And I want to help you achieve that. I want to help you find that and grasp it and like run with it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And also too, not from a place of, there is a tendency, I want to put that out there, there is a tendency, especially for people who are breaking away from systems and structures, dogmas, there's a tendency to break away from, but seek alignment with something that still mirrors that.
Yes.
And so you may find that you are wanting to break away from a system that tells you that you need to follow these guidelines in order to be accepted. And you may find yourself being attracted to another group that does the very same thing. The intention needs to be clear, that you are wanting to connect with your source. And what will happen is you may be led along a path where you attract different groups of people, but never with the intention to keep you, help me out here, to keep you in solidarity. There is no group that should demand your solidarity.
Right.
And with the consequence of being not accepted, should you choose to follow your own path.
Right.
You know, and that's what I like about the spiritual path, is that you're free to choose. You're free to eat the watermelons and spit out the seed. And I appreciate every aspect of my journey because of that. I can see the beauty in probably at the time I didn't. But now looking back, I can see the beauty in every setting that I've been placed, in every group that I've associated with, and still acknowledge that there were aspects that did not serve me at the time, you know?
Yeah, I feel very strongly, like literally my guides are like, you have to bring this up now. So, you know, you feel pulled very strongly to things, is that for people that have gotten this far in this conversation, if you are active in a Christian community or a Muslim community or a Jewish community or a whatever community, and you feel the sense that there is something beyond that teaching, or in addition to that teaching, or, you know, as I've discovered, and I'll speak only to my personal experience, I was not raised Christian per se, was kind of raised non-spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
with a hint of we should be Christians. Circled into the Christian church, 10 years there, learned some amazing things, grew, but didn't grow to the point where I wanted to. Left the church, circled all the way out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Explored the whatever, I don't know what this energetic field is. It's source, it's universe, it's this nebulous kind of non-personal thing, and circled back into, there's a tremendous amount of truth in each of those teachings that is available to you when you understand it in the context of your highest good.
Yes.
And your higher self, the one that knows you best and wants the best for you. And then when you know, and it's the development of the chakras. As I study the development of the chakras, the higher chakras are about, I know me, therefore I want to be better for you.
Yes.
And so then you start to go outward and want to share and teach it and love and bring people in so that they can express their true, authentic, highest self.
Right.
So it isn't you might feel like you're leaving your church community, and maybe at some level you are. You don't have to necessarily. There are people that balance both. But in the end, be your authentic self. And it is my belief that the Christ consciousness that is talked about by some teachers is this beautiful, amazing, incredible, loving, healing, energetic force that is the things that were written of Scripture, but not taught of men, right?
Yes.
So it's a challenging thing, but if you've gotten this far, know that you're not alone. And Jerry and I have talked about this in previous videos and in offline conversations. We both have explored that same path.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm not here to throw a sales pitch out, but know that you're not alone. And if we can be of guidance to you, we would love to help you along that path.
Right.
And just guide you to find your own power.
Yep. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I had goosebumps while you were speaking. Because like we spoke of last week, we've had similar paths, although we didn't know each other and completely different, but it was a similar thing where, you know, I went through a process where I was angry because I felt like I had wasted time following something that probably I perceived at the time did not guide me towards my greatest good. Yeah. But I was being guided all along. That was part of the process. Yeah. You know, and to be at the stage right now where I can appreciate that as part of the process has been healing as well. Yeah. And the gift that is given to me, I believe, is the ability to see both sides of the coin. To see the deception, but also see the beauty that exists. Yeah. And like you mentioned, the very same teachings that exist and have existed for years, but have been manipulated by man for their own good. If we could help to point you to see, because ever so often we're speaking and Scripture would come to mind, you know, and not only that, it helps me to see the connection that exists among all people. Yeah. You know, it has always been amazing to me. I've come across people who walk the Jewish path for a while. I've come across people who walk the atheist path and also Muslim. And to see that we're all being led while following different forms of Scripture. Right. And we all arrived at the same place. Because what you acknowledge in the midst of that is that there is something greater than my physical self that is seeking for my alignment, that it is seeking for my greatest good. And that something is going to happen. I know, I say this with so much conviction because I know where I was, that point where you know there's something more, you don't know what it is, but you're trying to push in that direction regardless of what everybody else is saying to you. Yes. And you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you, you are being led. Yes. Trust your gut, you are being led. Yes. Just as you were led to hear this conversation, and you will be led to hear many more things.
Always, 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 always. And even my pastor said this. The last church I attended, he said this on a really regular basis. Hear what I'm teaching you, go back, read it, listen to your inner guidance, speak to God, get led to know the
Yes.
truth for you.
Yes.
And that was a very correct statement, in my opinion. And no different than what you're hearing from us. Go in, speak to your higher self, speak to your the higher being that you have a conversation with, and get guidance towards the truth for you.
That's a good point. You mentioned your pastor, and something that came to mind was during that time, and I want to just admonish people: do not underestimate any experience you come across during this time.
Right?
I would have certain thoughts sometimes after my meditation, sometimes after reading the Bible, and coming to different conclusions than what I was taught, and feeling like I need a sign, I need something, and I would go to church. And there would be one sentence that was said in the midst of everything by somebody I know that, if I had mentioned the thoughts that I was having, would have completely opposed it. But that one statement that he made was confirmation to the thoughts that I was having.
Yeah.
So, in church or in the scripture, there was some place that it was said, out of the mouth of babes. And it also, there was a place where Peter said something, and Jesus said to him, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. The universe and God will use everything around you
Yes.
to confirm the experience that you're having right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, the phrase that comes to mind to me on a regular basis is, you will find me in the woods. And, that to me is, you're not going to find in a building or with another human being, but as you travel through the trees that are your experiences and your lessons and your learning, as you travel through, you will find truth.
Yes.
And you find the love and the acceptance that you're seeking, because
Yes.
we're seeking acceptance through things and people and through organizations and institutions. We're seeking that acceptance, but the true acceptance is right inside.
Yes.
Right in that heart chakra, right where your true self lives and hangs out and waits for you to go, ask me a question. I have the answer for you. Don't talk to that person. Ask me. And it's been really fascinating how much more settled I feel. And through all of the chaos and the swirl of what's happening on the mainstream media, the news, the blah, 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 is I hear it and I go, that pretty much sucks. I'm not going to get caught up in the middle of that. How can I be a force for good while that's going on?
Exactly.
Rather than hunkering down and going, they're coming after me. And I can see, and I get it. I'm not trying to make fun of people that are in that situation by any means. In fact, what I want to encourage them is, guess what? You're not alone, and there are people here that want to help take your hands and help you stand up and go forward, and not have to be in that space any longer.
Definitely, and you will thrive. You will thrive. You're gonna look back at this time, and you're gonna thank it so much. You're gonna bless it.
Yeah. Yes.
You'll realize that it was part of the significant experience that you needed to go to get to the other side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about when I was so stressed out and caught up in all my corporate chaos and just working, and then burning myself out, if I would have had this opportunity, it would have catapulted my growth process dramatically. So I'm hoping and believing that there are people that are experiencing the same sort of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
You feel stuck. It's just that, and the words that we speak reflect back to us.
Yeah.
So you could feel stuck, or you could be still.
Yeah. Right.
Different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you see yourself as being stuck, everything about life will reflect that back to you. Right. But if you're being still, what you're actually doing is welcoming answers, you're welcoming possibilities, you're starting a new page. It's just perspective.
Right.
Perspective, and it starts reflecting back to you.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Stopped or paused, right?
Mhm.
And in that pause is the opportunity. Scripture even talks about be silent.
Yes, be still and know that I am God.
Right.
And
So there you
the
go.
other part of that says, I will be exalted. I will be exalted. You
Mm.
know, it says more than that, but I'm going to stop there.
Right? Right?
But
Oh, how amazing. Well, this has been incredible.
yes,
I think this has been an amazing talk, and I believe that this is really going to resonate with people, even if it's just like you said, that one kernel,
yes.
a little bit that will help drive or encourage or grow the next piece of their journey. So
And I want to go on record putting that intention that it will fall on the air that it needs to fall on, that it will bless the person that it is to bless, because I know that there are people who want to hear or need to hear this at this time.
yeah, whether it's one, 100, or a hundred
Oh,
thousand,
yes,
it's
does not matter.
yeah. Stay faithful to the objective that we be the guides, the light, the support, and however that shows up is how it's meant to show up.
Right.
Yeah, love that. Love it. Thank you so much again. And we will have another talk show in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, have an amazing, blessed, incredible day. I'm hoping for more sunshine today in Michigan. It's been raining a lot.
Awesome sunshine here in Houston.
Send us a bit, would you please? All right. Take care and have an amazing day.
Okay.
Bye.